psychologist Maria Andreoli. She's going to be talking about how to protect versus protecting versus overprotecting children. How do you tell the difference? She's going to be giving us some tips between protecting and also preparing them. All right. So Maria Andreoli, our psychologist. Good morning to you, Maria. Thanks for joining us on The Breakfast Show.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. Maria, we the title of today's conversation is Protect or Prepare. How to help kids face life's challenges. What is the difference between protecting kids or preparing? Is it something that parents should do? Should we do both as parents, or should we focus just in one rather than the other?
Well, I think, just looking at the words protect and prepare, they're both important. But I guess in this context, protecting can be thought of like removing a challenge that your child is maybe about to experience, because we don't want them to feel uncomfortable. Whereas preparing is helping them face it safely, giving them support and encouragement, but not removing that. So I think in this context, preparing is probably what's going to give the kid the most confidence over, protecting them and just getting rid of their challenges completely.
Okay. So let's start with the protecting. You mentioned that the preparing is actually something that we should be aiming for, but surely there is a place for protecting. You wouldn't leave your child by themselves in the corner of a busy Sydney street, because there might be challenges that they are way above what they can cope with. So how do you tell when it's time to protect versus when it's time to prepare? How do you draw that difference?
Yeah, well, I guess, some wisdom is definitely important here. When a kid's pretty young, they need a lot more protection. Mm-hmm. There's many things that they can't do on their own. But, as they get older, they begin to develop this desire to explore the world. And it's good to still guide them in how to do it. But, we don't want to remove any kind of risk or challenge completely and cross over to this side of overprotecting. A lot of the research shows that overprotective parenting has this really strong link with children developing anxiety. So it's not about I'm not here just saying don't protect your kids. I think as parents, it's natural to do so. But as they get older, being mindful of not removing every single challenge that life throws their way.
And I actually quite like what you said there, that things that child can do versus things that children cannot do. So knowing what they can do and what they cannot do, I think that we're starting to overstep the boundaries of protecting into overprotecting when we start to do for children the things that they could do for themselves. So I really like that distinction. I'm wondering if you could give us some real life examples, maybe perhaps from your practice, of cases where you found where parents were overprotecting and where, or perhaps of examples where they were actually preparing them. Can you give us some real life scenarios?
Yeah, absolutely, I can. I've got to be cautious and speak in quite general terms here. Yeah. For the sake of my client's confidentiality, but a situation that I do tend to see over and over again is, kids developing some kind of anxiety surrounding going to school, and maybe just not really wanting to go to school, feeling maybe saying that they feel sick in the morning and all these little symptoms of anxiety. And, parents, especially mothers, I think naturally really just want to protect their kids and can be quite hurt by seeing their kids hurt. So, a natural response is to just say that's okay, you don't have to go today. But what we begin to see is this really dangerous pattern of school avoidance developing, where the kid it starts to get harder and harder to get that kid to school. So that's a situation that I do see quite a bit where, I think well-meaning parents who just want to protect their kids, actually end up removing that challenge from them completely. And that anxiety just grows. I guess, when we remove challenges for our kids, even if we have the best intentions, we're actually telling them hey, I agree with you. You're not capable of doing this. And so we can understand why that kid just gets more anxious about having to show up to that.
Well, it backfires, right? Because at that first glance, it seems like, hey, I'm actually going to help my child by alleviating their anxiety, by removing their problem. Yeah. But what the message that is being told without words is, as you said, okay, yeah, I agree with you. You're not capable. And if I'm not capable of that, well, what else I'm not capable of? And that list just keeps increasing to the point that it becomes overwhelming. What about?
Yeah, exactly. And like, yeah.
Can you tell us a bit, perhaps an example on the other side of the spectrum where you've seen or parents, facing that child's anxiety, but in a way that prepared them or encouraged them to push through? So in that school case that you said, perhaps, what could have done? What other alternatives could we explore? What else could we say to the child other than, yeah, okay, you can stay at home today?
Yeah, so I think another alternative is, it's about helping that child face that tricky situation, and basically showing them, like, I know you're scared, but I'm here for you, and I'll help you through it. It's not necessarily about just totally dismissing that kid's feelings, saying, I don't care if you're anxious, you just got to get to school, or just dismissing. It's still spending the time with that kid, nurturing them, understanding where that anxiety is coming from, talking them through it, but then guiding them towards problem solving, because there might be a genuine reason why that kid doesn't want to go, and they might actually need our help. And that's part of preparing that child to be able to face that safely. So not removing the challenge, but guiding them through it, and showing them that we are there with them in it.
Do you think that prayer can help? Particularly if you're like in a Christian household, and the child is facing, what role could prayer have in that? Like, what kind of prayer could you pray with that child, for example? Could you teach her or him to pray?
Yeah, absolutely. I think prayer absolutely serves an important role. I guess part of that preparing, right, is there might be genuine things that kid is scared of that can be solved and require you to step in. But as life is in general, there's always going to be an element which that kid cannot change, and you as their parent cannot really prepare them for either. And that's where prayer comes in, the part of life that we can't control and that we place in God's hands. So I like that you bring that up, because I also think that this could be a beautiful opportunity to begin teaching your child, that when life gets tough, we turn to God with that and we put it in his hands. So I think it's such a beautiful way of looking at it.
I see. No, that's very good. And you mentioned that you also, when you are consulting with your patients, what sort of practical steps or strategies that you find most helpful for them to try at home, particularly if they can see that their child is developing anxieties around different tasks of their different areas of their life?
So when it comes to anxiety, the childhood anxiety, the research points to two main things that parents can do that seem to really help kids overcome that. It's part of preparing, and one of them is called guided exposure. Mm-hmm. So this is supporting kids in facing like these challenges or scary tasks in like small, manageable steps. So guided exposure, like exposing them to that thing, obviously, assuming it's not harmful, little by little. So a lot of the time, say with school avoidance, if kids have started to develop a pattern of just avoiding school, parents can kind of fix that or reverse that by setting up some gradual return to school plan where the kid will start off by doing, say, a couple hours, then half days, then full days. So it's like gradually exposing them to that scary thing. Yeah. And the other thing that the research points to is called emotion coaching. So I think I talked a bit about emotion coaching last time, but it's this idea of noticing and validating that kid's feelings. So like not letting them go unseen, but then guiding them towards problem solving and looking for a solution. So it's this perfect balance of validation, but also what's our next step? How are we going to solve this problem? What's our way forward to kind of face this task?
I see. And Maria, my question is, I'm thinking here about families that got divorced and then now the parents of the child are living in separate homes. And there's sometimes there can be anxieties around that, particularly if the parents have now new partners and the child doesn't feel comfortable around that. What kind of, what could be potentially, just like theoretically here, some conversation that you can have with the children to help them cope with that new reality that, hey, now you do need to go to, let's say, your dad's or your mom's house. And yes, you might feel a little bit uncomfortable there. I mean, assuming that there's no physical or emotional harm happening necessarily, just, but there is an anxiety going on. How would you coach a child, to problem solve through that?
That's a big question. It's a very that's a big situation. That child's and I do work through a lot of children going through divorce, divorced parents. Their entire sense of safety and stability has been rocked. That foundation has been absolutely shaken for them. Doesn't mean it's always going to feel that way, but in that moment, and that child is so likely to develop anxiety. And some kids show anxiety through internalizing behaviors. So you'll get the typical worries, tummy pains, going quiet. And some kids externalize. They begin having behavioral problems, not listening. But both of these are anxiety based, right? So that's what your child will look like. And so that child in that moment actually feels very unsafe. And that's the reason why they're having these different challenges of either anxiety or behavioral problems. And the priority actually for that child, I think in this case, is recreating a sense of stability and safety before that child is even ready to begin having conversations and understanding things. I think the first step is to create safety by creating as much structure, predictability, and routine for that kid as possible. So very clear times. When are you going to mom's? When are you going to dad's? Very clear schedule, very clear expectations and routine. And once that child begins to feel safe, then you can begin encouraging them to step outside the borders of their comfort zone a little bit more. But in that case, I think the kid needs a lot more nurturing before they're ready for preparing.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what about anxiety relating to, let's say, bullying at school? Can we do that? Can we also prepare them for facing bullying situations, let's say with controlled exposure, for example, or perhaps there is a different approach to bullying?
Well, look, bullying is not okay. I think we can agree on that. And I think you recognize by suggesting maybe there's a different approach, because it's true. We do need to, get on top of bullying. It's never okay. But the sad thing that I see in my practice over and over again is that certain children do tend to attract bullying. And I see this a lot with parents. They bring their kid in, their kid's being bullied at school. The parents say, let's change them. Let's change the school. That'll solve the problem. That kid just ends up getting bullied again, right? And it's very sad, and it's not to blame the kid at all. Bullying is never the victim's fault. But these kids, do tend to lack the skills of standing up for themselves, lack the skills of confidence, lack the skills to be able to shake things off. They end up having big kind of reactions to mean comments by others, can be quite reactive. So those kids actually do need help with developing the skills for confidence. So there is an element, whilst we need to stop the bullies, there is an element of needing to prepare our kids to be in those environments and to be around other kids, and to know that sometimes kids say mean things. Sometimes they joke in mean ways, and different ways that we can respond to that. Yes, sometimes we need to go tell the teacher, but sometimes we need to be able to just shake it off. And that can be tough, but it's an important skill to prepare our kids for as well.
Absolutely. Well, what a great skill to give to your kids, to your children. This is a very precious gift, I would say. Maria, thank you so much. Yeah. It was a very, very interesting conversation. And of course, if you have any questions for Maria in regards to parenting or bullying and anxiety management, let us know. Text us here and we will send that message straight to her, or you can put you in contact with her.